Good morning. I'm excited to be here. This is really fun for me, coming from the United States down and speaking to your company. And proper goal setting for me is a passion. And if you're going to set goals, whatever goals you set, you need to feel passionate about. And if you're passionate about it, then you're going to work to succeed. Now, a little bit about me. I went to this small Catholic college in Massachusetts called Assumption College. And Assumption at that time was really small, maybe 800 students. And I was paying my way through Assumption, so I didn't have enough money to buy a car. And I had to hitchhike. And what I found was, anytime I took this sign with me, it would tell people the direction I wanted to take, and then they would know whether to pick me up or not. And as I've been driving around South Africa, what I've noticed, there's a lot of people out there with their thumbs out, just like I used to. And then, if they only knew. Now, one of the things about being without a car is that I once had a class where I had to go to a youth detention center every day. And so on the back of my Assumption College sign, I put detention center. Now, how many of you would be in a hurry to pick me up with the detention center sign? And it was mostly guys, and it was mostly guys who are going, why do you want to go to a detention center? And so for me, it proved the point. When you have a goal, you can go after that goal and be successful just by letting the public know. Now, in 1969, we're talking, a few years ago, I set a goal to hitchhike to Santa Barbara, California, from Washington, D.C. in 5 days. 2,600 miles, the equivalent of Johannesburg to Lagos, Nigeria. And I wanted to do it in 5 days. And I was focused on that goal. And I was excited about that goal. And I kept my signs. This sign is that sign. So my signs are over 50 years old. You never know when you might have to take off. So, again, being passionate. Now, when I started deciding that I was going to hitchhike from D.C., initially the first year was to Los Angeles in 5 days, what I did was I started, without even knowing it, I started working using scamps. And so the first step in setting any goal, in addition to being passionate about it, is the goal needs to be specific, and then you have to create a strategy to achieve that goal. For me, part of the strategy was, that first year, was to find a way to let the public know where I was going. And I was lucky, and I found this bright orange sideboard and this bright yellow paint. And I figured if I'm standing on the ramps for the interstates, people approaching me would be able to see my sign and then decide whether they're going to pick me up or not. The C stands for challenging. Would you agree that hitchhiking from DC to Los Angeles in 5 days is probably going to be a challenge? Absolutely. My dad wasn't very happy that I chose to do that. At age 20, what possibly could go wrong? His literally last words to me were, they're going to find you dead in a field with a bullet hole in your head. And so, as you can tell, that didn't discourage me. I thought, well, that'd be a part of the adventure. And what I did was I embraced that because I was a little bit independent. Let's say I was the oldest of 7 kids. My dad was probably thinking, oh my God, what an example is this kid setting for all the other 6? But I wasn't worried about that part because I was pretty sure they weren't going to do it. And we started, I recruited a guy out of Boston because part of my strategy was 2 guys were probably better than 1. And the people that picked up 2 guys are probably not going to mess with them, but if they picked up 1, they may be tempted. And so I recruited Jack from South Boston. I was from DC. We were, I would say, lower middle class in terms of the amount of money that we made. I actually paid my way through Catholic high school also with a Washington Post paper route. So you can tell even back then I was driven. And that Washington Post paper route not only paid for all 4 years of my high school, but it also paid for the first year of my college. And then in college, I worked 2 jobs. So I was focused. I created a strategy. And the strategy was, Jack and I agreed, to go from DC all the way to Kansas City on I-70, pick up I-35 in Kansas City, and then follow that down to I-4, I think it is, or I-10, and then go west and end up in, and that was the road that they were working on at the time was Route 66 and then the interstate. So it was going back and forth. And Route 66 ends at the Santa Monica Pier. And so that, I thought, that's perfect. And we said it, we knew we had to be in Kansas City by the second night. Measurable. The signs, public. We had, it's challenging, and I knew it was achievable. You know why? Because I saw an ad in the Washington Post that was roughly this big. And it said, Greyhound would get you from DC to Los Angeles in 5 days. I went, Greyhound can do it. I can do it. They cheated. They had drivers who were being paid. And so we had a specific end date. It needed to be in 5 days. And that was how we set the goal to hitchhike across the United States. Now, sometimes when you set goals, things don't work out as planned. So one time I was hitchhiking from Massachusetts down to New York City, and I was in New York City, and I was standing at the edge of the George Washington Bridge, which is I-80 extended, and I went, but my uncle lives off of Route 46, so I stood right at the edge of the bridge in New York City and said, I want to go to Route 46. I actually had a guy pick me up and take me all the way to Sparta, New Jersey. That's where my uncle lived. So sometimes the goal that you set, something happens and you have to adjust. The adjustment is the important piece because not everything you plan is going to work the way you planned it. But if you're fleet of foot, then you can adjust. And in that adjustment, you'll tweak, and then you'll decide, is this going to work or is that going to work? So that's the base of scams. Now let's talk about business. As a recruiter, my business is really interesting because I don't own the client. I don't own the candidate. Believe it or not, they're both humans. Humans sometimes don't agree with me. Can't believe that. I mean, I'm always right? I know better. I had 4 sisters. I know better. And so what is important about recruiting is, number one, you have to understand that recruiting mirrors the sales process line by line, step by step, perfectly. And if you follow the line by line, step by step perfectly, you stand a much better chance being successful in recruiting than if you don't. So in 1992, before the internet, MCI Telecommunications, a long-distance carrier, hired me to create a recruiting strategy to transition a 200-member IT organization from candidate-rich Washington, D.C. to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Now, just so you know, Washington, D.C., I couldn't tell you how many IBM mainframe shops there were. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, I could tell you. There were 3. And we needed to have 200 people there. And I went, oh, shoot. And so I did some research. And out of those 3, MCI was the largest by 2 times. The second largest was an insurance company. Insurance companies' culture were not going to fit an MCI culture because insurance companies want 95% of the information, and then they want to build consensus, and then they'll make a decision. MCI was, give me 65% of the information. We're going to have to tweak things as they go along, and let's move. And that's the reason MCI was able to break up AT&T. AT&T was a monopoly until 1985, until MCI sued them and went all the way to the Supreme Court in the United States and broke them up. MCI was light on their feet, just like everybody here has to be, including me. So I created a strategy. I knew that I might get 20 people from Cedar Rapids at the most, and I might get another 20 or so from kind of the area around Cedar Rapids. But I had to have 120 people in seats in 1 year, January 1st, 1993 to December 31st, 1993. 120 IT professionals, from scene manager, probably 8 of those, to probably 15 managers, and then a lot of IT developers and IT test folks. And then even, I think they wanted me to find 10 college recruits. So, no internet, but I'm a really good recruiter. And my strategy was I would work with an advertising company out of Dallas, Texas. And the woman that worked with me she was amazing. Lori and I are still friends since 1993. And what she would do is she would find out where IT professionals, we call them data processing back in the day, where those people were getting laid off, and then we just hit it. And so most people thought Iowa was flat as this table. And I told Lori, I said, we need to show a photo in our advertising that shows a hill. And Lori's great. And so she found this photo. And it was a photo taken from a hill down to the city of Cedar Rapids. Now, the candidates didn't know that was a landfill. But it was a hill. We got a hill. And so in our advertising, we answered the objection of it's flat. No, it's not. I took a picture from a hill. And there are other hills. I rode my bike all the way across Iowa in Ragbri, which is an annual event. And I'll tell you, over by the Missouri River where you start, lots of hills. And over by the Mississippi where you end, lots of hills. And there's some in between. But so there's hills there. So I needed to show that and answer that objection before it came to me. The candidates could look at the photo and go, I didn't know there were hills in Iowa. So that was great. Then we wrote creative advertising to get them in. But you know what? That's not going to do it. And so I was networking with the people that we had. I ended up recruiting the first IT manager that was promoted within McDonnell Douglas. Yes. She was a woman, and she was smart. And she was smart enough to know that I want a good team, and I want to pick the ones that are on my team. She introduced 10% of the people I needed. She introduced me to 12 candidates, and we recruited all 12 because of Debbie. That's 10%. That's a start. And then we started doing that with those people and then the other people that I recruited. And sometimes what would happen is I'd interview somebody and then they'd say, you know, my spouse is an IT professional. I said, well, I assume you're both coming to Cedar Rapids. I said, let's talk. And so sometimes there were some married couples that got hired too. Here's what happens when you set a goal and you start working to achieve your goal. The universe listens. And the universe goes, I see what you're trying to do here. I'll help. And the universe does help. For me, that's exciting. Because, you know, you can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But once you get moving towards meeting a goal and start seeing some success, you will be successful. One of the things I was going to add to the bottom of this was expect success, and I forgot. Darn it. My third book, the title is Expect Success, The Science of the Over 50 Career Search. So what I have found over the years is that most candidates don't know how to do a career search. And what happens? They have a terrible CV. They don't know how to interview properly. They don't know how to sell themselves. And being a nice guy that I am, I decided to help. They also don't know how to negotiate salary, and nobody knows how to do that better than me. And so there is a chapter in there on that. And you're not allowed to read that chapter, by the way. Just want to let you know. And all of my chapters are called steps. So it's a 12 steps to finding a job. So you complete one step, go to the next. So let's talk about what happened. Iowa, in the wintertime, will get temperatures down to minus 40 degrees wind chill. I have no clue what that means in Celsius. But I will tell you that it's minus something. Minus a lot, as a matter of fact. And the good news is you can just always keep adding clothes. And houses are heated, mostly. And so that's how the environment that I was trying to recruit in. And I was recruiting people out of Dallas, Texas, who had never seen even 32 degrees before. And then they found out minus 40. So my first 2 months of that year, January and February, we had 5 people in seats. Count them. That was it. And what I would do, my strategy was to take 3 to 4 managers the last 2 weeks of the month per week, and we would interview 18 to 24 candidates per day. Every single night, we would make hiring decisions. I would open up 80 open requisitions because we needed to recruit at least 120 people. And that way, at any moment, we could fill whichever ones we needed to fill based on the candidates we had. So every night, over dinner, we'd make hiring decisions and how much we were going to pay that person. And then I had to send an MCI mail to MCI in Denver, and they had to agree to allow me to extend the offers. And they were great. They knew what kind of pressure we were all under. And so they had somebody change their work schedule to my schedule, and that person was waiting for my email every single night to ask to fill these open positions. There were people in Dallas who said to me when I interviewed that day, listen, I'm really excited about this. If you want to call me as late as midnight and extend an offer, that's good. And I went, okay. Don't ever tell me something like that unless you mean it. 3 people got calls at midnight, and all 3 accepted on the spot. And the reason that's important is because they knew we were interested in them. We moved immediately. We knew this person was a good fit, and we moved immediately, and we got them. Now, here's the other thing about interviewing. What we did, the strategy was that we would, as much as possible, stay at Embassy Suites. Because in the Embassy Suite, you have your public area where you have your couch and TV and a little breakfast bar and a table. And that was the public area. And in the other part is your bedroom. So I told everybody, shut your bedroom door. And by shutting your door, now we're just in the open space. And then leave your Embassy Suites front door open so that people can see the conversation going on, and keep your curtains open for the same reason. And so that was good most times, but there was one time the senior manager came down to me and she said, Bill, don't ever send a candidate like that to me again. And I went, how did I mess up? And I said, well, we're MCI. That person was with Sprint Telecommunications. We're working on commercial billing. That person's working on Sprint commercial billing. We're on IBM mainframe. That person's on IBM mainframe, working with the same database management system. Where'd I go wrong? Then she started to laugh. She said, evidently over lunch he had beans. No. And she said, when he left, I had to open the windows. So, there's sometimes things don't happen the way you want them to happen. What I would like you to do right now is pick something that you are passionate about, especially within the business, maybe a project, and be thinking about that as I finish up this part, that you can start filling in scamps. And here's the rest of the story. The vice president of commercial billing came up to me at the end of February. Inside the building they remodeled for these 200 people. So we needed 120 the first 12 months, but we needed another 80 after that. And so he comes up to me, and Steve was always great. He was a little understated sometimes. And he came up and he goes, so Bill, it's February, 2 months in. I was just walking around the building and I was counting heads and seats. And I got all the way up to 5. Should I start to worry? And I went, Steve, come on, somebody you're talking to. No, you don't need to worry. I'll let you know when you need to worry. Of course, I was like the duck on the top of the pond. And he said, okay, as long as you tell me when to worry. I said, nobody wants to move to an Iowa minus 40-degree wind chills in January, February. Things will change in March. The first week of March, we extended 23 offers, got 23 acceptances. The second week of March, we extended 18 offers and got 17 acceptances. Steve was much more comfortable at that point. Now, since we had to relocate most of that group of people, we relocated over the entire project about 150 families to Cedar Rapids. That was big. And since we had to relocate them, what I did as part of my strategy is I talked to a realtor that I knew they were really, really good. And I said, here's what I'd like you to do, if you're willing to do it. Take everybody, all my candidates that we're interested in, on a tour of Cedar Rapids. Now, Cedar Rapids at that time had about 102,000 in population, so it wasn't a giant town. But they had a football stadium, and right next to it was a minor league baseball stadium. And the football stadium was for the high schools. And it was a single-A baseball club. So about the lowest you can go in the minor leagues. And I said, show them the twin stadiums. And that'll help impress them. Maybe not. But Cedar Rapids was really a nice community. It was clean, people were friendly. And they showed them Cedar Rapids. They showed the community theater and the other attractive points of Cedar Rapids. And they were a prime reason that I was successful, because they were selling the community, not houses. They were selling the community. I said, don't talk to them about buying a house. They'll come back to you if they move here. Just sell them the community. And because of them, I'm very convinced that I was successful. And so you have to think of when you're putting together your strategy, you have to think of all the contingencies that may impact that strategy. On December 31st, 1993, we counted noses. Needed to have 120. Only 10 people relocated from Washington, D.C. And we recruited 133 new people to MCI in that first year. But I wasn't done. I needed to recruit another 80 for the first 8 months of 1994. And guess what happened? The employment market changed. I was living off of company laying off people. And now the employment market started to change, where more companies were hiring. And there was a company by the name of Perot Systems, H. Ross Perot's company. And Perot Systems saw my success because they were consulting to MCI. And they found out what I was doing, probably from one of the managers that I was working with. And there were times where I actually ran into their people interviewing in the same hotel we were the same days. And I went, seriously, guys? Come on. Give me a break. Well, in March of 94, the head recruiter for Perot Systems came up to me and he said, we're not having the same success we used to. I said, I'm not surprised. And he said, why aren't you surprised? I said, because I've changed my strategy, but you obviously haven't changed yours. And he said, what's your strategy? And I said, are you paying me? And he laughed. He said, no. And I said, I'm not telling you my strategy then. And so they struggled. And meanwhile, we hired about another 100 people. And we ended up having more than what MCI originally planned, but they were so excited they just hired them because they were going to need them anyway. So let's look at what it is that you have. It can be a personal goal. It could be something that you're doing here in the law firm. What would you be passionate about? Is there a project that you would be passionate about? And if you have a project that you would be passionate about, you don't have to tell anybody yet what it is, but just kind of write a quick note, 3 words or more, of what it is. And then you take that, and then you have to look, is it challenging? Some people call those stretch goals. And stretch goals can be good if they're tied to achievable. As a recruiter, I can't tell you how many times I recruited a young salesperson. And I'm thinking of one in particular. I had to recruit a number of cell phone store retail clerks. And they're probably, if they meet plan, they'll make about $25,000 a year. And I recruited this young fellow, and I said, so what's your goal for next year? I'm going to make $1 million. And I went, maybe not. I said, well, that's interesting. How do you plan to do it? Well, I'm just going to sell lots of phones. I said, how many phones do you need to sell to make $1 million? I don't know. I said, you better figure that part out, because that's key in you making your $1 million. Too often people set lofty goals, but they don't create a strategy to meet those goals. And I'm sure you've met them. And if you don't have a strategy, a challenging goal is not going to help you. And the other thing is, it's got to be achievable. Because guess what? Your brain's smart. Your brain's up there going, really? You think you're going to make that goal? I don't think so, and I'm not willing to work on it. And so it's kind of fun how you get to work with your brain. But when you're goal setting and you start succeeding, then your brain starts buying into it. So the way you succeeded that last time, I was kind of surprised, honestly, but you did good, so maybe we can do this other one that's a little bit more challenging. And so then it has to be measurable. And measurable, and the last S, the specific end date, these guys are tied together perfectly. Because if you have that, you know where you have to be and where you are. I knew I needed a minimum of 120 IT professionals in Cedar Rapids, Iowa in 12 months. It's 10 a month, minimum. And I knew January and February were going to be tough just because of the weather in Cedar Rapids. And I was confident that in March things would change, because humans are wonderful. We forget all the bad weather stuff as soon as we turn into the next month. You know, you guys had snow last Monday, and I was at the Hilton over in Santon, and the people were going, it's snowing out, it's snowing out. And I'm going, you're calling that snow? I live in a ski resort. Actually, the town that I live in has 2 ski resorts. We got 5 meters of snow where I lived last winter, and the ski resorts each got 15 meters of snow. I have some pictures. But anyway, but the thing is, most everybody has already forgotten that snow from last week. Maybe 1 or 2 haven't. I saw a nod. You guys didn't even have to drive in it. Come on. You know, driving in snow is fun, especially if you like to drift. Yeah. I love driving in snow. I have 2 Subarus, all-wheel drive. Those puppies go anywhere I want to go. I put snow tires on all 4 tires. Yeah, it's great. But you get a little ways away from that bad weather, and people are already looking forward to the nice weather. And that's true of almost everything else. If they have a bad experience, and if it wasn't a terrible bad experience, over time they start to forget. And then is when you really work hard to give them all the reasons to look forward and what's going to benefit them. People are interested in what benefits them, right? Isn't that true? Absolutely. And if it benefits them, they're now going to listen to you. One of the things that I did in my strategy, I looked for IT professionals with Iowa on their CV. because I learned pretty quickly that people want to move back to Iowa once they have kids. And I went, I'm going to go after those folks. And most of those folks, I would just say, it's so safe in Iowa, and the education is good, and I'm talking in terms of their interest. And then I say, and MCI is well-known, big company, great opportunity, go forward. Sign me up. It's awesome. It's fun being me. So once you get each one of those steps going, and public is important. Now, when I was hitchhiking, I used signs to tell people where I was going. In my goal for MCI, I was telling people, hey, we're looking for people all over the United States who would move to Cedar Rapids, but my first goal was to find people who have the right talent and then talk to them. And people were introducing to me from Seattle, Washington, Arizona, Dallas. I recruited a ton out of St. Louis. As a matter of fact, that's where McDonnell Douglas was located. And McDonnell Douglas was building F-15 fighters back then. And I'd fly in on a TWA flight back when that existed. And I was always kind of looking at, make sure none of those fighters wanted to take me out. Because I was just making a living on their IT staff. So it's important to make it public, but here's the key. There are some people that when you tell them what your goal is, they're going to throw ice water on it. You'll never be successful doing that. You don't tell them your goal. It's simple. Just don't tell them. Just tell the people who would support you, and then what they do, and they don't even know they're doing this, but what they do is they keep you accountable to meet your goal. And they do that by saying, so Lisa, how are you doing on your goal? And you're going, the water. It's important to make it public because that helps keep you accountable to your goals. And when you're accountable to your goals, now you're even more motivated to succeed and expect success. So anyway, does anybody have any questions for me right now? Right. Well, you can do that, but the other thing is that you have to change your strategy. Because if something happened, maybe your strategy will need to change too. So that's where I would start first. And then once you have your strategy, then the rest of these you will adjust according to timing or whatever. Just like those first 2 months at MCI in January and February that year. I was pretty sure it was going to be really tough to get people to Iowa in those two months. And I was also really sure that we were going to start having success after that, get some traction. So I didn't change this because that's an MCI goal. That was my client's goal. And I didn't change that because everybody knew I had to have those people in seats by the end of the year. This had to change because instead of having 20 people, I had 5 at the end of February. And so the measurable had to change moving up per month. So yeah, when you adjust your goals, you'll have to make some changes. And it depends on whether the client is driving the goal or whether you are driving the goal. Well, fear of failure is natural. And we all have it. The best way to fight fear is by action. And if you're making your goal public, it depends on who you're making it public to, right? If it's to the entire staff, that's one thing. If it's to a partner, that's something else. Your fear of failure with your partner is important, right? Because your partner's going to go. But if it's with the staff, then that can be scary because you're saying, oh man, I've got an aggressive goal here and I don't want them to see me fail. But on the other hand, it can be exciting for them to join in and be part of it and see that action. And sometimes you have to work harder to make the goal work. I mean, I was working literally from 7 a.m. till midnight on that recruiting search. And I had fear of failure. That was the reason I was working all those hours. And then I'd spend the night in my bed in the embassy suites. And literally there were times when the alarm went off at 7 o'clock in the morning, I didn't know what city I was in. And I would look at the phone and the phone would have the area code and I go, oh, I'm in Minneapolis. So I had a fear of failure, but the way I adjusted for it was to act and be successful and expect success. That, I'm a firm believer of expecting success and the power of that. Sure. Consistency is important. It's just like in law. If you're consistent with the laws of your country, whatever they are, depending on whether it's business or mortgage, it doesn't matter. If you are consistent with those laws, then my guess is you'll probably be successful in terms of that one case. If you're building a business, same thing holds true. You have to be consistent. You have to adjust your work depending on what your goal is. Sometimes you may change the measurable. Have a good, solid reason for doing it. For me, the change was nobody wants to move January and February to Iowa in this one case. So it's okay. I made an adjustment and then we move forward. So, the big hairy goals are nice, but it gets back to it's challenging. Is it achievable? And that's something that you can judge. I can't judge it. But if it's achievable, if there's some reason, if you have some measurement that you can say, well, so-and-so company did it. If they did it, I can do it. And I'm sure there are so-and-so companies out there. And so if they did it, you can do it. Okay, so that's a great question. And the reason it's a great question is that there is something for you to do. And what you do is you try to analyze it and figure out what went wrong. Now, regarding getting across the United States in 5 days, I did it 3 times in 1.5 years. Twice were from DC, once was to LA, once was to Santa Barbara, and once was Santa Barbara back to DC, and I made it in 5 days each time. Is it possible something could have happened that it would have slowed me down? Absolutely. My first trip out, I had some interesting rides. The first ride, though, was a great omen. I was standing I was on the ramp for the Washington Beltway in D.C. or in Maryland, and I had an L.A. sign up, just on a lark. And by the way, I gave it away to some girl on the way. The second year. and I thought, yeah, you never know, maybe we'll get lucky. And this old Falcon station wagon had painters, ladders on the roof, 5-gallon pails in the back. He stopped and he said, are you guys really hitchhiking from here to Los Angeles? I said, yes, sir. He said, jump in. So we jumped in the car. He said, I can only give you a ride from Beltsville around to Connecticut Avenue, which was probably 8 miles or so. But I was thinking, hey, a start's a start. And on that ride, he said, you know, back in the 1920s, I was pretty well known as a good artist. And in 1929, this guy approached me in LA and asked me if I would go to work for him. And I didn't think Walt Disney would make it anywhere. I turned him down. And now he's painting houses. Well, now he's probably not with us anymore. That was back in 1969. And so, you know, sometimes the universe gives you omens too. And for us, that was a great omen. It's like, wow, what a connection to Los Angeles already. We haven't even left my neighborhood yet. You expect success. That's the bottom line, is to expect success. And when you expect success and you create a strategy to succeed, and then you fill in the rest of scamps, you'll be successful. Sure, there's going to be times where things are going to happen that aren't going to be the way you want. One guy dropped this off in East Columbus, Ohio, 7:30 in the evening. East Columbus, Ohio was kind of like some of the worst sections of Johannesburg. And Jack and I looked at each other and we said, well, by 8 o'clock, we don't have a ride out of here. We need to be beating feet because this is not a good place for us to be. And so probably 15 minutes later, because we were expecting success, a tractor trailer truck stopped and I had my St. Louis sign up. And he stopped and he said, you boys are in a really, really, really bad section of town. I said, yes, sir, we know. He said, tell you what, I'll give you a ride to St. Louis if you help me unload my truck in St. Louis. I'm in. Now, I cheated. My job just before we left was working at a Toys R Us distribution center. I knew how to unload trucks. And so we drove to St. Louis. He backed into the dock. And on the way, I found out there were 2,500 cartons. They were about this big. They weren't very heavy. They were aspirin. And so we backed up, and he opened the doors, backed all the way into the dock. Jack and I got inside because we were the ones unloading. And I said to the warehouse manager, so are you going to run the forklift up and unload it that way, or are you going to have rollers? He said, rollers. And I said, okay, give me a stack of pallets here, stack of pallets here. When this one gets down to the last one, pull it away, bring me another stack. Jack had no clue about unloading trucks. So I put him on the other end. And I said, Jack, every time you have to take more than 2 steps to the end of the rollers to get to the rollers, let me know. We'll clear a space, set up more rollers, and then keep it going. In 2.5 hours, we unloaded 2,500 boxes. Now, here's the result of that. Got back in the truck. Truck driver, I had to wake up because he was taking his nap. He said, what are you guys doing in here so soon? And I said, well, we're done. Here's the bill of lading. He goes, you're done? I can give you a ride all the way to Kansas City. We made it to Kansas City on our second night. That was our goal. So you expect success. When you expect success, success will find you. But you really have to feel it all the way from in here. You have to expect success. You don't say it, you believe it. And that's how you'll be successful. Sure, figure out what it is that's working and then build on what's working and also look at what didn't work. Because there's times where what didn't work, it's more important to know what that was, right? But keep them kind of in a sack someplace, because things change. The economy changes, the social world changes, and you never know when you might want to go back to that bag and then, might want to take a look at this again. So it's important to analyze success and failure. And I was constantly doing that on my recruiting effort, and I constantly did it on everything else that I do when I set goals. I measure what's going right, what's going wrong, how to improve what's going right. So it's absolutely important to do that. Well, actually one was to come here and go on a couple safaris, and my daughter, and so I wanted to, South Africa, from Park City, Utah, I'm in the Rocky Mountains. I'm on the western side of the United States. And we have some cool animals. Not like your cool animals, but, we have elk and we have moose. Don't ever get in the way of a moose, or an elk, for that matter. We have deer that are almost pets. Get out of here. We have mountain lions, we have bobcats, we have coyotes. So we've got some somewhat dangerous animals too, but you've got really cool animals. Long trunks. Talk to themselves, they can talk over miles. You've got some really cool animals. And so I had to see that at some point in my life. I'm 74. I'm thinking, I need to get someplace to see that. And my daughter, so expect success. My daughter won a silent auction item to come to South Africa for a shooting type safari. Now, I have no desire to do that, but I'll take photos. But her husband wanted to shoot. So her husband, his dad, his cousin, and one of his friends all came, and I think they stayed at Wildebeest Lodge or something like that. And so those guys were shooting. Becky and I were up near where you grew up. And what was it? Bakaboon. I can never say it. I'll have to focus on that. So at Bakaboon, and we went on an evening safari and a morning safari. And the evening safari was great because we saw lots of different animals. The morning safari was great because some lions decided to have breakfast about from here to that cabin and away from the road. And so in my notes to my family back in Maryland and all over the East Coast, I went, I was a little late for breakfast, but I'm glad. So that was one that's kind of recent. And then as a result of that, I wanted to see the penguins, because I didn't think there was going to be a chance at age 74 that I'm going to be going to Antarctic. And you guys very conveniently had penguins. What's not to like about that? So, that's more of a personal goal. I'm building my speaking business. That's going to be more my focus as opposed to my recruiting business. I set a goal to be the #1 Google ranked talent attraction consultant back in 2020. And last August, I had a friend call, and I didn't even tell them that that was my goal. And they said, so Bill, have you ever done a search on Google on talent attraction consultant? No? Yeah, you might want to. And so I did. And so I'm the #1 Google and Bing ranked talent attraction consultant. That I didn't pay for that. So mine was granular. It came from my work as opposed to there's a couple ads ahead of me. But so that worked. Now, part of the way I got there was every Tuesday I dropped for 2 years in a row. I dropped a talent attraction Tuesday blog, and then on Fridays I dropped a job search Friday blog. And I knew that all of that would get entered into Google, and it was on my website. And then people were sharing it. And by sharing it, they were connecting me with them, and Google looks for the connections. And I've had 147 television interviews, and each one we put talent attraction consultant. Google, if it goes on YouTube, that's owned by Google. and so I just figured out that this was a way for us and for me to be successful. And I'm a sole proprietor. And so that's how I did it. Well, I've been recruiting since 1981. And if I was going to burn out, I would have burned out a while ago. And so for me, I'm passionate about it. And I would suggest that if there is something you're passionate about, sure, you're going to have some dips. There's no question. But at some point, if you're passionate about reaching your goal, you're just going to pull up those bootstraps and get working on it again. You got to have courage. You have to expect success. That's the key, is expecting success. Your brain is really wonderful, because if you are expecting success, you will do the things that you need to do to be successful. Just put your brain to work. You know, what small piece of our brain do they say we use? I don't know if it's true or not. But in my case, what I've found is that when I expect that I'll be successful doing something, like becoming the #1 Google ranked talent attraction consultant, that's out of my hands other than the specific actions I took to get there. And I wasn't burned out. That's writing 104 blogs every week, or 208 blogs every week for 104 weeks. That's a lot of writing. But I expected success, and as a result of everything that I was doing, I was successful. So burnout can happen, but you don't allow it to. You just find a way to kind of work your way through it. You can do it. Expect success. And that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. It's important for communication to take place, both up and down. And when that happens, then you really are a team. Yeah. And both sides are holding each other accountable. And, it's important these guys up here do what they need to do, right? And as well as everybody else doing what they need to do. And when you do as a team, I don't care if it's rugby, I call it soccer, you guys call it football, because we have the other football. But it doesn't matter, because if you're all working together, then you're going to be successful. And that's the bottom line. Now, what I'm going to offer to you today, don't do it over the next 24 hours, but if you're working on your goals and you want to do a Zoom call with me, so I'm Mountain Time, so if we set up an 11 a.m. call for me, that's 7 or something like that for you. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's about right. So we can do it up to 8 a.m. and get you in work time if you want. I'm happy to help you set your first goal. And once you set one and start working towards that, you're golden. Because now you're going to be successful, because now you've got the motivation, now you have the knowledge. I'll ask you questions. So how are you going to go about doing that? And then you have to, that's your strategy. It's part of S. And once you tell me your strategy, I may ask you some more questions, just to clarify my thinking. Not saying your strategy is incorrect, but just to clarify my thinking so that you will be successful. Because once you have your strategy, everything else falls into place. So the way to reach me is bill@recruiterguy.com. Real simple.